Good day, everyone. So for today, me, Sheila May Mariag, and my partner Maria Teresa Manlanao will present to you the adaptation to aerobic and anaerobic training. So first, what does it mean by aerobic training? So, aerobic exercise is any type of cardiovascular conditioning. It can include activities like walking, swimming, running, or cycling. You probably know it as a cardio. By definition, aerobic exercise means with oxygen. Your breathing and heart rate will increase during aerobic activities. Aerobic exercise helps keep your heart, lungs, and circulatory system healthy. So, endurance, muscular versus cardiorespiratory. Endurance is a term that refers to two separate but related concepts. The first one is muscular endurance. Muscular endurance is the ability of a single muscle or muscle group to maintain high intensity, repetitive, or static contractions. So next is the cardiorespiratory endurance. Cardiorespiratory endurance is the ability to sustain prolonged rhythmic exercise involving relatively large muscle groups. So next, evaluating cardiorespiratory endurance capacity. In studying the effects of training on endurance requires an objective, repeatable means of measuring an individual's cardiorespiratory endurance capacity. In that way, the exercise scientist, coach, or athlete can monitor improvements as physiological adaptation occurred during the training program. Cardiovascular adaptation to training. Multiple cardiovascular adaptation occur in response to exercise training, including changes in the following. First, heart size, stroke volume, heart rate, cardiac output, blood flow, blood pressure, and blood volume. Heart size adaptations. The left ventricle changes the most in response to endurance training. The internal dimensions of the left ventricle increase mostly due to an increase in ventricular filling. The wall thickness of the left ventricle increases, making the potential contraction of the left ventricle more forceful. So next is stroke volume adaptation. In stroke volume adaptation, endurance training increase SV at rest during submaximal and maximal exercise. And it increase in end diastolic volume caused by an increase in blood plasma and greater diastolic filling time contribute to increased SV. The increased size of the heart allows the left ventricle to stretch more and fill with more blood. Heart rate during exercise. Submaximal decreases proportionally with the amount of training completed, and it may decrease by 20 to 40 beats per minute after 6 months of moderate training. In maximal, remains unchanged or decrease slightly, thought to decrease to allow for optimal stroke volume and maximize cardiac output. So, in resting heart rate decreases with endurance training due to more blood returning to heart. Sedentary individuals can decrease by 1 beat per minute per week during initial training. It is highly trained athletes may have resting heart rates of 40 beats per minute or less. Heart rate recovery period. It is the time after exercise that it takes your heart to return to resting rate. With training, heart rate returns to resting level more quickly after exercise, and it has been used as an index of cardiorespiratory fitness. So next, cardiac output adaptation. Cardiac output at rest and during submaximal exercise. At a given exercise, intensity does not change much following endurance training. In fact, cardiac output can decrease slightly. However, maximal cardiac output increases considerably in response to aerobic training and is largely responsible for increase in VO2 max. Blood flow. Blood flow to active muscles is increased by training. Increased muscle blood flow results from four factors. First, increased capillarization. Second, greater opening of existing capillaries or capillary equipment. More effective blood flow distribution and increased blood volume. Blood pressure. Resting blood pressure does not change significantly in healthy subjects in response to endurance training. But some studies have shown modest reduction after training in borderline or moderately hypertensive individuals. Blood pressure increased as a result of endurance training. Plasma volume expanded through increased protein content, return from lymph, and up-regulated protein synthesis. This effect is maintained and supported by fluid-conserving hormones. Red blood cells volume also increase, but the increase in plasma volumes is typically higher. Next is respiratory adaptation to training. Static lung volumes remain unchanged. Tidal volume unchanged at rest and during submaximal exercise, increases with maximal exertion. Respiratory rate stays steady at rest, decreases with submaximal exercise, and can increase dramatically with maximal exercise after training. Pulmonary ventilation increases during maximal effort after training. Pulmonary ventilation increases during maximal effort after training. The respiratory system is seldom a limiter of endurance performance. All the major adaptations of the respiratory system to training are most apparent during maximal exercise. Metabolic adaptation to training. Integrated adaptations reflected by changes in three important physiological variables related to metabolism. First is lactate threshold. Second is respiratory exchange ratio and oxygen consumption. Lactate threshold is a physiological marker that is closely associated with endurance performance. The higher lactate threshold, the better performance capacity. So next is respiratory exchange ratio or RER. Endurance training, the RER decreases at submaximal work rates, indicating greater utilization of free fatty acids as an energy substrate or carbohydrate sparing. Oxygen consumption generally remains unchanged at rest and remains unaltered or decreases slightly during submaximal exercise following endurance training. Factors affecting VO2 max are the level of conditioning, heredity, age, gender, specificity of training. Level of conditioning is max is reached within 8 to 18 months of heavy endurance training. Heredity accounts for as much as half the variation in VO2 max as well as an individual's response to training. Age decreases in VO2 max with age might be a result of age-related decreases in activity levels. Next is gender. Lower in women than men. 20% to 25% lower in untrained women and 10% lower in highly trained women. Specificity of training. The closer training is to the sport to be performed, the greater the improvement and the performance in that sport.